To priests. So I'm going to go back to that observation I made. Priests say, I admire your work, but I would never want to do it myself. And I said, do you hear confessions? And they say, yeah. Well, it's a little late for that, isn't it? Confession is actually more efficacious in most cases than solemn exorcism. If someone has an unconfessed sin and they're actually possessed, if once they go to confession, the legal hold, okay, let's back up what that means. The legal hold the demon has on them is broken. That means this: every time you commit a sin, or every time you make a choice, you either bind yourself to God through the choice of the good, or you bind yourself to the demons in evil. The term absolution, absolvere in Latin, literally means to dissolve or untie, or to remove the bond of justice. Because in justice, you've taken yourself out from underneath God and placed yourself underneath Satan through your sin. And as a result of that, you're connected to this guy now. And so when you go to confession, it breaks that tie, that absolution, that you're no longer bound to your sin or the effects of sin. This brings up a very important topic. So let me finish this one, though. So priests, I tell priests, look, if you're hearing confessions, you're already doing minor exorcisms and you don't even know it. And a lot of times they'll come in and people will go to confession and all of a sudden it breaks. Part of the reason we know this to be the case, too, is because one of the things that the priest who taught me exorcism, he said, hey, by the way, there's this thing called fishing. And I'm a fly fisherman, so I got quite interested. And he said, this is what you do. If you're sitting in the confessional and you know there's people out in the church and they're not coming to confession, start saying a binding of prayer against any demons from keeping them from going to confession. It's like clockwork. You'll do that within the minute. Within the minute, somebody will step into the confession. Father, I wasn't going to go to confession today, but... And what that tells you is that demons can actually convince people and sway them regarding their own spiritual development. This is one of the reasons why the church and the saints throughout history, it's only been in the last 40 or 50 years that people have this idea that somehow or another, if they have a positive emotional reaction to some spiritual thing, then it's of God. That's what Martin Luther thought. In fact, he actually made it the criteria just at the time when God sent St. Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross to the church, who completely departed from that and said the emotions cannot be trusted. Why? Because the demons have access to them. They can cause the emotions. And I've seen it. They can cause positive emotions in relationship to certain pious practices. But they can also block them as well. So you can't follow your emotions. They can't be trusted. You have to follow reason enlightened by faith. That's what we should be following. So one time when this one woman who was possessed said, well, I just feel like... I said, wait a minute, let me get this straight. You know the demons have control over your emotions and you're basing your decision off your emotions? Which is a real big problem, because in possession work, you're constantly trying to get the psychological separation between the person who's possessed and the demon, because the demon's gotten into them psychologically and is messing with them, and you got to get that psychological separation, because if you don't, the demon can hide behind that and you can't get anywhere. Okay. So I tell the priests, if you hear confessions, you're absolving people of that tie that they have to these demons, and it breaks the hold that the demons have on them. And as a result of that, the demon is going to retaliate against you. This is why even good priests sometimes will just go through these periods where they're being attacked, assaulted internally in relationship to it. As an exorcist, the only difference probably between me and most priests who are unwilling to get involved in this area, which, by the way, if a priest wants to get involved, I'm not so sure. Most good exorcists are the ones who got drug into it kicking and screaming. But the difference is this: it's a boxing ring. It's a boxing ring in several ways. One, it's warfare. You're going to take a beating. Every one of us is in the boxing ring. Every one of us is going to take a beating in some way or another from demons. There's going to be some suffering. There's going to be something that they're going to do to us. It's just the nature of our existence after the fall. But it's also our opportunity for raising our place in heaven. So the difference is that I realized, okay, taking your beating is just part of the process. Right? You just have to be willing to take your beating and fight this thing, and you know you're going to get attacked, and you just have to be willing to suffer through it and be willing to go through that. So the key thing is that willingness to suffer. And that's the thing that demons don't want you to master. They will use every form of fear possible to keep you from being willing to suffer. Because if you're willing to suffer, there is nothing in your spiritual life that you cannot obtain. But if you are unwilling to overcome that fear of suffering, that horror of suffering, as they used to call it in the catechisms, the horror of suffering, if you're unwilling to overcome that, you will never reach the heights of perfection. So you're in the boxing ring, you know you're going to take your beating, you might as well just man up and deal with it. And that's the real issue, is that priests have to realize that the minute they're ordained, the target's on their back, and they're going to be taking the beating. The question is how much are you willing to do it for the sake of those under you? That's the real question. Okay. So as an exorcist, yeah, are you dealing with a high level of spiritual warfare? Yeah, you are. It's pretty high. Is it constant? No. Even God gives us reprieves. People will very often ask me, Father, what do you do to get away from it all? I tell them I smoke cigars and drink scotch. Right? All right. So if someone said, do you really? I said, yeah, once in a while. Like, why do you do that? Because I refuse to allow demons to rob me of a normal life. And that's what demons are trying to do. They envy our lives. They envy the good that we can enjoy. And so as a result of that, they want to rob us of that and make us think, oh, these things are evil, or these things are bad, when in point in fact, as long as you're in moderation, they're fine. But the point being is that, too, you have to be able to leave work at work. This brings up a very key point in spiritual warfare. St. Peter said, be vigilant and watchful, for the devil goes about seeking someone to devour. In other words, you have to be vigilant. Now, vigilance isn't going to seek it out. It just means you keep an eye on it. So if something spiritually disordered arises up in your family or something, if the demons kind of pop up their ugly head, that's when you cut their head off. Not before. You don't go around looking for them, because if you look for them, they'll find you. And so you have to avoid that. So the levels of spiritual warfare can be very high. Probably the highest level of spiritual warfare, though, is actually the person who's possessed and actually who has decided to cooperate with the will of God and fight their way through it.